Arizona has hundreds of slot canyons. Most people only know one. But from canyons that swallow you whole to one that takes 6 days just to walk through, the full list will change how you see this state forever. At number 10, we have Upper Antelope Canyon. And if you have ever seen a photo of light beams pouring through a narrow crack in the earth, this is where that was taken. It sits on Navajo land near the town of Page in northern Arizona. The canyon runs about 660 feet long and sits at a flat elevation, which means almost anyone can walk through it. No ladders, no climbing, just you and some of the most dramatic rock walls on the planet. What makes it famous are the light beams. Around midday in spring and summer, sunlight drops through the narrow ceiling opening and hits floating dust particles on the way down, creating rays that look almost too good to be real. This is not a place you can just show up to. Every visit goes through a licensed Navajo-operated tour company, and because millions of people want to see those light beams, reservations fill up weeks or even months ahead of time. The canyon walls were carved by flash floods over thousands of years. Water rushing through a confined space with nowhere to go scoured the sandstone into smooth, flowing curves. Every inch of the wall tells you something about how violent that process was. The orange and red color in the walls comes from iron oxide in the sandstone. When the light beams hit those colors at the right angle, the entire interior of the canyon glows. Photographers travel from every country in the world specifically for that shot. Upper Antelope is the most visited slot canyon on Earth. That fact alone should tell you something. But the canyon sitting just down the road from it is actually preferred by serious photographers, and almost nobody talks about it the same way. Coming in at number 9 is Lower Antelope Canyon, and the first thing you notice is that it is shaped completely differently from its neighbor. Upper Antelope is wider at the top. Lower Antelope flips that. Narrow at the bottom, wider as you look up. To get through Lower Antelope, you use metal staircases and ladders built directly into the rock. The canyon demands a bit more from your body, and that changes the whole atmosphere of the experience compared to the upper section. The light beams that made Upper Antelope world famous do not appear here. But the trade-off is walls that twist and fold in ways that feel almost sculpted by hand. Many photographers actually prefer these formations over the more famous light beam shots next door. Lower Antelope is also on Navajo tribal land, and guided tours are required. But the smaller crowds and the more physical route give it a completely different energy. You feel like you earned your way through it in a way the Upper Canyon does not demand. The canyon was barely known outside of the Navajo community until the late 1990s. Now it draws hundreds of thousands of visitors a year. That growth happened almost entirely through photography, as images from inside the canyon spread across the internet and pulled the world in. Both Antelope Canyons sit within the same geological system, shaped by the same forces, separated by a short drive, but they feel like entirely different places once you are inside. That difference is what makes the next canyon on this list such a surprise. At number 8 is Antelope Canyon X, sometimes called Canyon X, and it is part of the same broader canyon system as the two you just heard about. It is just a few miles away from them near Page, but most tourists have never heard of it. Canyon X is actually two connected slot canyons, a north section and a south section, and together they deliver the same deeply carved red sandstone walls and striking light effects as the more famous sections. The rock looks identical. The experience is very close. The difference is the crowd size. Because Canyon X does not carry the same name recognition, tours here draw far fewer people. Some photography tours allow tripods and give visitors extended time inside the canyon, which is almost impossible to arrange at Upper Antelope. Like every canyon in the Antelope system, Canyon X sits on Navajo Nation land and requires a licensed guided tour. But for anyone who wants the Antelope Canyon experience without standing shoulder to shoulder with hundreds of other tourists, Canyon X is the version worth knowing about. Canyon X is genuinely beautiful in its own right, not just a lesser version of something better, but the canyon coming in at number 7 is different in a way none of the Antelope Canyons can match, because it holds water long after the floods are gone. Number 7 is Waterholes Canyon, and its name tells you exactly what makes it different. The floor of this canyon contains natural rock holes that hold water for days or weeks after flash floods pass through. In the desert, that is something worth paying attention to. The canyon stretches about 2 miles in length and splits into two sections, divided by an open sandy wash. The first part starts wide enough to feel relaxed, but that changes fast. Deeper in, the walls close in until hikers are pressing sideways just to fit through. To reach the tightest section, you descend a 16-foot ladder. The walls down there are so close that some hikers move through by walking along the sides of the rock rather than the floor. It is not for anyone who struggles with confined spaces. Before 2018, you could enter Waterholes Canyon with just a basic hiking permit. That changed. Now it requires a guided tour through the Waterhole Canyon experience. Photography tours are available and allow tripods, giving serious shooters more flexibility than at most of the more famous canyons nearby. Waterholes Canyon is also on Navajo Nation land near Page, which means the same rules about licensed guides apply. The smaller crowds and the physical challenge of the narrow passages make it a very different experience from walking through Upper Antelope with a large group. The water-carved rock holes in the floor are a reminder of how this whole landscape was built. Flash floods do not just carve walls. They dig into floors, sculpt rock around corners, and leave marks that outlast the flood itself by centuries. Number 6 was named after something that moves differently. Coming in at number 6 is Rattlesnake Canyon, and before you ask, the name has nothing to do with actual rattlesnakes. It comes from the snake-like winding patterns the water carved into the walls over time. Look at those curves long enough and you will see exactly what they mean. Rattlesnake Canyon sits within a short drive of Upper and Lower Antelope, near Page. It is part of the broader Antelope system, carved by the same forces, made of the same red sandstone. But the character of the canyon is harder and more physical than its famous neighbors. Getting through Rattlesnake Canyon involves tight squeezes through narrow passages and sections where you need to climb ladders built into the rock. It asks more from the people who visit it, and that filters out a large portion of the crowd that floods into the main Antelope Canyons. The canyon sits on Navajo tribal land and requires a guided tour with a Navajo operator, same as every other canyon in this region. But the smaller groups and the more adventurous route make it feel closer to canyoneering than tourism, which is a big part of its appeal. Rattlesnake Canyon does not have the worldwide name recognition of the Antelope Canyons, and that is exactly what works in its favor. Less recognition means fewer crowds, and fewer crowds means you actually get to experience the canyon rather than just moving through it in a line. That pattern of less famous meaning better experience keeps showing up across this list. Number 5 is the clearest example yet, because it is a canyon that was only discovered in 2018 and already has one of the most memorable names of any canyon in the state. At number 5 is Cardiac Canyon, and yes, the name is a warning. To enter the canyon, you have to descend a 90-foot steep sandy hill. Then, at the end of the hike, you have to climb back out. A ladder and rope system is in place, but it is still considered strenuous. The canyon stretches about 2.5 miles in length, making it one of the longer slot canyons near Page that is open for guided tours. Inside, you move through multiple passageways, climb over rock formations, and walk between walls that glow orange and red when sunlight enters. Cardiac Canyon was discovered in 2018, which makes it newer to the public than almost anything else on this list. But the canyon itself was carved over the same thousands of years as every other slot in this region. Discovered recently does not mean new. What sets Cardiac Canyon apart beyond the physical challenge is its history. Several Navajo families reportedly took shelter inside this canyon in the 1860s to avoid forced relocation during the period known as the Long Walk. The canyon held people when there was nowhere else to go. That history sits beneath every step you take in there. The tours are run by Navajo-operated companies, and small group photography tours are available. Getting to walk through a canyon with that kind of story attached to it is not something most visitors are expecting when they sign up. 5 canyons in, and every single one has been within a short drive of Page. Number 4 breaks that slightly. It is still in the same general region, still on Navajo land, still accessed by guided tour, but the journey to get there is part of the experience in a way the others are not. Number 4 is Secret Canyon, connected to the Waterholes Canyon system and carrying many of the same features as the most famous Antelope Canyons. Deeply sculpted sandstone, swirling formations, vivid orange and red color across walls that rise higher the further in you go. The entrance to Secret Canyon starts wide with shorter walls. Then the canyon begins to tighten. The passage narrows, the walls climb, and the whole space starts to feel closer around you. That shift from open to confined is one of the defining experiences of any great slot canyon. To get there, visitors take an off-road ride in an open Forbes 4 vehicle across about 8 miles of Navajo terrain before reaching the canyon entrance. The tour also includes a stop at a private overlook of Horseshoe Bend, away from the crowded public viewing area most tourists use. That private Horseshoe Bend stop is worth noting because the public overlook gets thousands of people a day. Standing at a separate vantage point with a small group is a genuinely different experience of one of the most photographed river bends in the American Southwest. Secret Canyon requires a guided tour like everything else in this area of Navajo Nation land. But the 4x4 ride, the canyon itself, and the Horseshoe Bend overlook together make it one of the more complete half-day experiences in the entire Page region. And then the list takes a hard turn. At number 3 is Deer Creek Narrows, and everything about it is different from what came before. This is not a canyon near Page. It is not accessible by car or by a short guided walk. It sits deep inside the Grand Canyon, and getting there is a serious undertaking. The Narrows themselves are only about 0.4 miles long. That sounds modest until you learn what it takes to reach them. You are looking at a hike of roughly 20 miles with around 10,000 feet of total elevation change, or an overnight rafting trip down the Colorado River, and that is just to get close to the canyon. Getting into the Narrows requires 4 separate rappels. One of those rappels drops approximately 190 feet alongside Deer Creek Falls. If you have never done technical canyoneering, this is not the place to start. The canyon sits inside Grand Canyon National Park, which means a permit is required. The combination of permit requirements, extreme distance, elevation change, technical rappels, and river navigation means that very few people will ever stand inside Deer Creek Narrows. That is part of what makes it what it is. Those who have made it through consistently describe it as one of the most beautiful slot canyons in Arizona. Towering walls close in around a narrow passage carved by the creek over countless years of water cutting through rock. The difficulty and the beauty are directly connected. Deer Creek Narrows does not care how many Instagram followers you have, or whether you booked your tour 6 months in advance. It demands a specific kind of commitment, and it rewards that commitment with a canyon most people on Earth will never see in person. 3 canyons left, and the next one swaps extreme remoteness for a different kind of access challenge. Number 2 has no guided tour requirement, no Navajo Nation permit, and sits just 4 miles from one of the most famous structures ever built in the American West. Number 2 is Arizona Hot Springs Canyon, located in the Lake Mead National Recreation Area, just 4 miles downstream of Hoover Dam, along the Colorado River. It sits right near the Arizona-Nevada state line, which makes it one of the most geographically unusual canyons on this list. The canyon stretches about 1.6 miles from its upper end down to the Colorado River. Much of that length is very narrow, with walls closing in tightly in the same style as the Colorado Plateau slot canyons in the Page area. The rock is different, but the feel is familiar. At the lower end of the canyon, you reach the Arizona Hot Springs, also known as Ringbolt Hot Springs. Natural pools of hot mineral water collect between the canyon walls, held in place by gravel-filled sandbags. The water temperature drops from pool to pool as you move downstream. The highest pool reaches around 110 degrees Fahrenheit. That is hot enough to require some adjustment before you can sit in it comfortably. But sitting in a hot spring inside a slot canyon, with walls rising around you, and the Colorado River close enough to hear, is not a standard afternoon. Unlike every canyon near Page on this list, Arizona Hot Springs Canyon requires no guided tour. You hike it on your own. But there is a catch. The trail is officially closed from May 15th through September 30th because of extreme desert heat. Access is seasonal, and the timing matters. The canyon also contains ancient petroglyphs carved into the rock walls, and the geological variety across the hike is significant. You move through different rock layers, different textures, and different colors over the course of a relatively short distance. It packs a lot into 1.6 miles. Arizona Hot Springs Canyon sits in a region most people drive through on the way to Las Vegas or the Grand Canyon without stopping. It is the kind of place that rewards the people who know it exists. And then there is number 1, which is not really in the same category as anything else on this list. But number 1 is where everything changes. Payre Canyon at the Vermilion Cliffs Wilderness is not just the best slot canyon in Arizona. It is one of the most significant canyon routes in the entire American Southwest, and it operates on a completely different scale from everything above it. The full route stretches 38 miles. It begins in southern Utah and ends at Lee's Ferry on the Colorado River in Arizona. That is not a day hike. Most people complete the full traverse in 4 to 6 days, depending on conditions and how much time they want inside the canyon. The canyon was carved by the Paria River over millions of years. The walls rise as high as 2,000 feet. Inside that space you find desert varnish streaks running down the rock, red rock amphitheaters, sandstone arches, wooded terraces, and hanging gardens growing out of the cliff walls. The canyon is part of the 112, 500-acre Paria Canyon Vermilion Cliffs Wilderness, which Congress designated in 1984. That federal protection is what keeps the number of visitors capped, and the canyon in the condition that makes people willing to spend nearly a week getting through it. The route involves numerous river crossings. Water levels can reach thigh depth depending on the season, which means the hike requires more than just endurance. You need to know how to move through moving water and plan your timing around conditions that change from year to year. Overnight permits are required and are limited to just 20 people per day. Getting a permit during peak season is genuinely competitive. That number, 20 people per day for a 38-mile canyon route in a 112, 500-acre wilderness, tells you everything about the kind of solitude that is possible inside. Then there is Buckskin Gulch. It is one of the most famous tributaries feeding into Paria Canyon, and it holds a record of its own. Buckskin Gulch is widely considered one of the longest continuous slot canyons in the world. The walls of Buckskin Gulch can reach hundreds of feet high, while the canyon floor narrows to as little as 4 feet in width. 4 feet. The same space as a standard doorway, with walls rising hundreds of feet on either side of you. It is one of those places that does not fully make sense until you are standing in it. Buckskin Gulch connects into the broader Paria system, which means anyone doing the full traverse may move through sections of it depending on the route they take. It adds a layer to an already extraordinary multi-day experience that very few wilderness routes anywhere can match. Paria Canyon has been used as a filming location, a research site, and a reference point for canyon geology for decades. It is the kind of place that scientists and filmmakers and long-distance hikers all describe in the same terms, which is to say, they say it is unlike anything else. The ancient rock layers visible in the walls of Paria Canyon represent hundreds of millions of years of geological history. Each band of color is a different era. Walking the full 38 miles is in some ways walking through time in a way that no museum can replicate. Every canyon on this list was carved by water moving through rock over time. That is the same process from Upper Antelope to Paria. But the scale at Paria makes the process visible in a way that feels overwhelming. 38 miles of evidence that water always wins eventually. There are people who have visited Upper Antelope Canyon, Lower Antelope Canyon, Canyon X, Waterholes Canyon, and every other spot near Page, and who have never heard of Paria Canyon. The gap between its fame and its significance is one of the stranger facts about Arizona geography. You can reach Upper Antelope Canyon on a 2-hour tour with 100 other people. You can book it on your phone tonight. Paria Canyon requires a permit, a multi-day pack, river crossing preparation, and nearly a week of your time. Both are worth it. They are just different kinds of worth it. Arizona does not have one great slot canyon. It has 10 that belong on a list, dozens more that do not, and one at the top that most people who love the state have never set foot in. Antelope Canyon is just the beginning. Paria Canyon is the whole story.